The funeral home smelled like lilies and disappointment. Dad's mahogany casket dominated the front of the room, surrounded by enough flowers to stock a florist shop. I sat in the back row wearing my only black dress, a $40 Target special that looked every bit as cheap as it was. In the front row sat my brother Marcus and sister Victoria, both draped in designer mourning attire that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They'd flown in from their respective coasts yesterday, Marcus from his Manhattan penthouse and Victoria from her Beverly Hills mansion. I'd driven here in my 15-year-old Honda, the same car I'd been driving since college. The same car that had prompted Dad to shake his head in disappointment every Christmas when I pulled into the driveway. Emma always was the simple one, I heard Aunt Catherine whisper to her husband. Never had any ambition like the other two. Simple. That's what they called it. I preferred content, but I'd learned long ago that my family couldn't understand the difference. After the service, we gathered at Dad's house for the reading of the will. The same house where I'd grown up feeling like a stranger among my own family. The same house I hadn't been invited to visit in 3 years. Marcus loosened his Hermes tie and poured himself a scotch from Dad's bar. Well, this should be straightforward. Dad always said the estate would be divided between Vic and me. Victoria nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Poor Emma can have some keepsakes, of course. Maybe Dad's old books or something. I sat quietly in the corner, watching them discuss my father's legacy like I wasn't in the room. Mr. Patterson, Dad's longtime lawyer, shuffled through his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Before we begin, Mr. Patterson said, adjusting his glasses, I want to acknowledge that this will might come as a surprise to some of you. Richard was very specific about his wishes. Marcus waved dismissively. Dad was always clear about his intentions. Victoria gets the California properties, I get the New York assets in the business portfolio. Simple division between the successful children. The poor one gets nothing from Dad's estate, Marcus announced to the room, gesturing toward me with his crystal tumbler. Makes sense, really. Why leave money to someone who'd just waste it? Everyone nodded in agreement. Aunt Catherine, Uncle Robert, my cousins, they all looked at me with that familiar mixture of pity and disdain I'd grown up with. Emma never did learn the value of money, Victoria added. Remember when Dad offered to pay for her MBA? She turned it down to work at that little nonprofit. I just nodded quietly, the same way I'd nodded through 34 years of family gatherings where I was treated like the charity case. The same way I'd nodded when Dad called my work, playing with computers for poor people, instead of what it actually was. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. If everyone's ready, I'll begin reading. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Dad's antique grandfather clock. The same clock I'd listened to during countless dinners where Marcus talked about his hedge fund success and Victoria discussed her real estate empire while I sat quietly eating my meal. I, Richard James Harrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, Mr. Patterson began in his formal voice. Marcus leaned back in his chair, already mentally calculating his inheritance. Victoria pulled out her phone, probably texting her accountant about tax implications. To my son Marcus, who has built a successful career in finance, I leave my collection of vintage watches, worth approximately $50,000. Marcus frowned. $50,000? What about the portfolio? Mr. Patterson continued reading. To my daughter Victoria, who has excelled in real estate, I leave my art collection, valued at approximately $75,000. Victoria's perfectly Botoxed face managed to convey confusion. The art collection? What about the properties? The remainder of my estate, Mr. Patterson read, his voice growing stronger, including all real estate holdings, investment portfolios, business interests, and liquid assets totaling approximately $47 million, I leave to my daughter Emma. The room erupted in stunned silence that somehow felt louder than shouting. Marcus jumped to his feet, scotch sloshing in his glass. That's impossible. There's been a mistake. I leave this to Emma, Mr. Patterson continued reading, because she is the only one of my children who never asked me for money, never judged others by their bank accounts, and never treated people differently based on their financial status. She has spent her career helping underserved communities through technology, turning down lucrative opportunities to make a real difference in the world. Victoria's voice came out as a squeak. $47 million? Emma probably doesn't even know this, Mr. Patterson read on, but I've been following her work for years. Her nonprofit has revolutionized how low-income communities access financial services, education and healthcare through innovative technology platforms. Her software has helped over 2 million people improve their lives. I felt tears threatening behind my eyes. Dad had been paying attention. All those years I thought he was disappointed in me, he'd been proud. While Marcus and Victoria built personal wealth, Emma built something far more valuable, a legacy of service. She turned down a $60 million acquisition offer for her nonprofit last year, choosing instead to keep serving people who need help rather than cashing out. Marcus was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You turned down $60 million? The room was looking at me differently now. Suddenly I wasn't the family failure anymore. I was the family mystery. Emma lives modestly not because she has to but because she chooses to. She could have monetized her innovations years ago, but instead she's kept them free for communities that can't afford alternatives. She is the daughter who inherited my values, not just my money. Mr. Patterson folded the will and looked around the room. There are additional details about charitable foundations and trusts, but that covers the primary bequests. This can't be legal, Marcus sputtered. Dad promised us the business would stay in the family. It is staying in the family, I said quietly. I am family. Victoria turned to me, her voice sharp. You knew about this? I had no idea Dad was planning this. But you knew about the acquisition offer? $60 million. I shrugged. Tech Global wanted to buy our platform and monetize it. I said no. You said no to $60 million? Marcus repeated like I'd admitted to setting money on fire. The platform helps people who have nowhere else to turn. Food stamp applications, housing assistance, job training, financial literacy. If Tech Global bought it, they'd charge fees and exclude the people who need it most. Aunt Catherine found her voice. Emma, dear, we had no idea you were running such a substantial operation. I'm not running anything substantial. I'm running a nonprofit that helps people. A nonprofit that someone wanted to buy for $60 million, Victoria said slowly, her real estate brain starting to calculate. Mr. Patterson pulled out another folder. Emma, your father also left you this letter to read privately. But there's one more thing I need to share with everyone. He cleared his throat again. Richard also established a provision. If anyone contests this will or attempts to pressure Emma regarding the inheritance, their bequests will be donated to charity instead. Marcus set down his glass hard enough to make it ring. He thought of everything. Your father was a very thorough man, Mr. Patterson agreed. As people began to file out, mumbling their shock and confusion, Victoria approached me. Emma, I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming you were unsuccessful just because you weren't wealthy. I'm not wealthy. She gestured around Dad's mansion. You're inheriting $47 million. Which I'll probably give away. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. Give away. Dad left it to me because he knew I'd use it to help people, not buy bigger houses. Marcus overheard and whirled around. You're going to give away our inheritance? It's not your inheritance. It's mine. And yes, I'll probably establish a foundation to expand our technology platform nationwide. But it's $47 million. And it can help 47 million people if used correctly. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. In a way, I suppose I was. The language of values over valuations, impact over income. Later, alone in Dad's study, I opened the letter he'd left me. His familiar handwriting filled 3 pages, but one paragraph stood out. Asterisk, Emma, I know the family has always seen you as the unsuccessful child. But I've watched you build something more valuable than Marcus's hedge fund or Victoria's real estate empire. You've built a life of purpose. The money is yours to use as you see fit, but I suspect you'll do what you've always done, find a way to help others rather than help yourself. That's why you're getting it all. Not because you need it but because you'll use it right. Sis. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Can we talk? Maybe I was wrong about some things. Then Victoria. I'd love to learn more about your work. Coffee this week. Funny how $47 million could suddenly make people interested in conversations they'd avoided for years. I folded Dad's letter and looked around his study with its leather-bound books and expensive furniture. All of this was mine now. The house, the cars, the investment accounts I'd never even known existed. But the most valuable thing Dad left me wasn't money. It was validation. After 34 years of feeling like the family disappointment, I finally understood that he'd been proud of me all along. He'd just been waiting to make sure everyone else figured it out too. My phone rang, my assistant calling about tomorrow's board meeting where we'd be discussing expansion into 3 new cities. The same expansion that just became possible thanks to Dad's inheritance. "Hi Janet, yes I can meet with the city planners at 9, I said, walking past the grandfather clock toward the door. "And call the lawyer. We need to set up a foundation." As I drove home in my 15-year-old Honda, now worth less than the interest on my new bank accounts, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow Marcus and Victoria would probably call their friends, their accountants, their therapists, trying to process how the family failure became the family fortune holder overnight. But I had work to do. 2 million people were counting on our platform, and now we had the resources to serve 20 million more. Dad would have liked that math.